All right, I think we're ready to start. Okay, welcome to Coffee with Cobb. My name is Christian Baycoat, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. And today we're going to be discussing how can Microsoft 365 replace my server. And in doing that, we'll be discussing how Microsoft 365 may be able to replace any small business server. Microsoft 365 or Microsoft 365 or M365 for short has many different features and functionalities built onto it. But however, today we're going to discuss and focus on how you might be able to replace your server in your small business with a M365 subscription. But first, what we'll do is I'll go ahead and introduce today's presenters. We'll have Jeff Blunt on, our VCIO, and Patrick Judy. He's our IT solution specialist, and they both sort of act as consultants for providing IT managed services to all of our customers. Patrick a little bit more on the front end, and Jeff on the front end and ongoing support and consulting with that. So we'll move on. And Patrick, we'll start with you. Take us through why a small business owner or manager may want to investigate replacing their server with Microsoft 365. Patrick, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think I'm also having, I don't know if I'm having camera issues or not, but I will go ahead and dive into this here. So, when you're talking about a couple of these things, first we'll hit on the cost. The average server for a small business is going to cost anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 roughly, depending on what you're using it for. This is a cost that a small business will probably have to incur every 3 to 5 years, depending on the life of the device. So when you take this cost and you add it in to the cost of properly setting it up, monitoring and managing the server, you're looking at a pretty hefty spend for the average small business. And again, I want to stress, you're going to hear us say this a lot today, it really depends on what your small business needs to operate and function on a day-to-day basis. As far as the Microsoft 365's cost, Jeff is going to get into that a little later. But Microsoft 365 will be a set monthly subscription with no physical hardware on site. So the next thing we're going to kind of talk about is the scalability. When we're talking about a physical server, there's only going to be so much operating space within that physical box. If you're a growing business that needs more space over time, there's going to be the cost of adding more physical hardware there. There's going to be some project costs to implement everything, and also a soft cost associated with potential downtime while this project is occurring. With Microsoft 365, as you grow, you're just adding a new license as you hire someone new, or deleting a license if somebody leaves the company. So you're really only paying for what you're using with Microsoft. So scalability is a nice plus. Lastly, there's the mobile aspect, which has really helped out our company as well as thousands across the country during this last couple months. With a physical server on site, you're working from home. You can access all that through a VPN or through a LogMeIn. That's fine. There does come with some downsides, specifically a slower connection, maybe some lagging. With Microsoft 365, as long as you have an internet connection, you're just logging into an account on any device, whether it be a phone or laptop or desktop, and you gain all the features that you normally have in the office.
Okay, so help us understand the context of what a small business server is, and what do we mean exactly when we mention a small business server?
Sure. There's a handful of different functions that a small business server handles. Email, file storage, device security management, authentication and printing. We'll hit those in a little bit. Going back to about 2003, Microsoft launched what they called was called the small business server. This is basically to handle a lot of these functions. It was one box that was meant for small businesses to take care of handling the basic things that a small business would need. Had its own Exchange server. You could host a website, store files, different things like that. It was a great product, but when it was working at its full capacity, it seemed to experience some performance issues. And with the advent of Office 365, small business server has slowly gone away, with Microsoft officially ending support of it in January of this year. So kind of going back to those main functions, email, we don't really run into it too much anymore with somebody having a Microsoft Exchange server on premise. We saw it a lot in the past, but not so much anymore. This was good for giving a business owner, full control over everything as far as configurations and changes, and really being able to customize everything to best fit your company. Disadvantages, came with the risk of losing data if it's not properly backed up. There's typically higher costs associated with licensing, and the biggest one is somebody's going to have to actually keep up and maintain and execute that whole process. So we'll talk about that a little later as well. File storage, a lot of businesses store files on their company server, which, they can only access when on the network or through a VPN or log me in type solution. Device security and management, a lot of your antivirus and different monitoring agents will often live in an on-site server. Identity authentication, basically entering your username and password to log in so that you can track who is accessing what within the environment. And printing, most businesses have a copier or shared printer, and everybody's connected to that device and able to print to it through their server. So those are just kind of a couple of things that you would find in an on-site server. So now I'll turn it over to Jeff. He's going to kind of talk about how different aspects of Microsoft 365 may be able to help replace some of these features.
Thanks, Patrick. So, the big question, can M365 replace my server? And to kind of echo what Patrick said, maybe. It all depends on what your needs are, but let's kind of dive into those a little bit more. Email, like Patrick mentioned, we really don't see a lot of people with an on-site Exchange or email server today, especially in a small business environment. But Microsoft does have Exchange Online, so if you are one of those organizations that do still have an Exchange server or email server on site, M365 obviously has Exchange Online. It's very robust. It's a very good product. Organizations of all size use that today. File storage, direct replacement for that in M365 would be OneDrive and SharePoint. So all those files and folders that you store on your server today can be moved into either a OneDrive or a SharePoint. So that's a direct replacement there. With device security and management of devices, M365 has a feature called Intune. Intune allows you to do things like set a screen lock timer on the computer. So if there's inactivity for 5 minutes or 15 minutes on the computer, it'll lock the screen or put the computer to sleep. It'll allow you to do things like disable a USB key from being able to download information. So different security features and device management that you can do with a server today. You can do most of those same things with Intune. The identity authentication is where you kind of get into some partial features that M365 has that you can use. So with an on-site server or an Active Directory environment, you are authenticating with that server through a device, with a username and password. M365 doesn't have a direct replacement for that, but it does have authentication features built into it. They're more on the file level or specifically on the document itself. So again, you can do some identity authentication, but it's not a direct replacement for what you may have in your closet today. And then lastly, printing. There's no direct replacement for that in M365. We'll talk about that, some suggestions on that a little bit later. So there's some items and features in Microsoft 365 that can definitely replace the functions of that small business server. However, you do lose some of that identity authentication and kind of have to provide maybe some workarounds for printing. There would also be a fairly large project, like Patrick mentioned, to migrate away from that server with that Active Directory environment to one without an on-site server and without an Active Directory environment.
Okay, so from what it sounds like, Microsoft 365 can't really replace a server without any workarounds or causing any potentially large project and a costly project. Is that right?
Yeah, there's no, if your server is doing these 5 functions right here, particularly that identity authentication and the on-site printing, there's no direct replacement that M365 has that will do all of this for you.
So what would you say to a small business owner if they really want to put everything in the cloud and not have anything on site anymore?
A combination of an M365 subscription with an Azure cloud server can accomplish this. So by adding the M365 to your environment, you'll get the things like the Exchange Online, the OneDrive and SharePoint, the Intune. You'll be able to do all those things that you do on your local server right now. And then by moving, your server to the cloud in Azure or something like that, you get to have that identity authentication and prevent that large project and disruption of moving to, a workgroup environment or away from that Active Directory environment. And then you get all those great features that M365 has, the steady, predictable budget, the scalability, the ability to support a mobile workforce. If I was going to set up a small business from scratch today, this is how I would do it with a Microsoft 365 subscription and then Azure cloud servers. It gives you the most advanced security, scalability, and mobility that's available today.
Okay, that all sounds great. So I imagine the most important question you'd ever get is how much would all of this cost someone?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's like Patrick said earlier, it really does all depend. It's really hard to answer that directly, but I'll try to give you some ballpark numbers and just let you know, what you might be up against if you're a small business owner. With an Azure subscription to a cloud server, your costs are going to depend on things like how much storage space you need, how much memory you need, the processing power your environment needs. As well as, Azure is going to charge you for the amount of data that you pull down from its cloud, similar to how those old cell phone plans used to give you a package built-in minutes, and if you went over your minutes, you paid extra fees. With an Azure cloud server, you're going to buy an allotment of downloadable, data, and if you go over that, you're going to pay for it. So there's some variables in there. But with all that said, the very standard small business that's going to do those things that we talked about is probably around $350 a month, somewhere in that range. And then you tack on, your M365 subscription, and that gets even a little bit harder, as it goes from anywhere from $5 a month all the way up to $57 a month. Again, depending on what your needs are. With the things, again, we talked about today, you're probably going to need the business premium subscription, which is around $20 per user per month. So those two things are going to get you the same functions and features that we've talked about today. And one of the best advantages of these subscriptions, obviously, like we said, the ability to scale up and down gives you a great advantage with this sort of setup. With the on-site servers, the ability to add more storage space, for instance, is there, but the costs and the downtime and the project to do that just really become unreasonable when with a cloud server, you can simply click a couple of buttons and scale and add more memory, add more processing power, add more storage very quickly and very easily. Lastly, we talked about printing. If you missed last week's Coffee with Cobb, I'd encourage you to go back and watch that episode. Mike and Mark discussed some options for centralized printing. There are some options for cloud printing or using a small print appliance and as a replacement for a full-blown server.
All right. So Patrick, I have a question for you. How would a small business owner determine which subscription or if an on-site server might be the best for them?
Yeah, sure. And typically that's just going to be you're going to want to have either an internal IT support system or partner with an external IT service that may, be able to help determine what's best for you. We advise our partners all the time on different aspects of their business that they may not have thought about. We've got some clients that send very sensitive information over email. They've never had somebody alert them to the fact that security risks of not sending encrypted emails for these sensitive documents. So kind of being able to go to them and move them from a business premium license, which is now a business standard license, up to an E3 license, which has some more of those different features that would help them help secure these emails as they're sending them out, has really helped them out. As far as, having a server versus not having a server, again, it's really all going to come down to what your needs are. We've got a law firm that has around 20 employees, but it doesn't have a server. It doesn't need one. We also have a small titling company with only 6 users, and they do have a server because of certain software applications that they live in to help their business run. So another important thing to consider when making these decisions is that you are going to need somebody to manage, monitor, backup, support, and really secure the environment. Just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean that you don't have to have that traditional support. If you've tuned into some of our previous Coffee with Cobbs, you know that very seldom is anything on your network a set it and forget it device or software. So, either having an on-site resource, an internal IT person, or being able to partner with an outsourced IT company is really a must to help your business stay secure and operational. So, with all that said, Christian, I'll kick it back to you. I don't know if we're going to do some Q&A and maybe talk about some upcoming Coffee with Cobb events.
Sure, we'll wrap this up a little bit. What I'll do is we'll talk about next week a little bit here. Plug ourselves. So next week, the 11th, the episode we're doing is automation in accounting, and it's going to be how AI makes dollars and cents for your business and can help with some business processes on the internal back end side of the business. Our returning presenters are going to be Mark Klein, our professional services manager, Michael Young, our strategic sales executive, and myself, the business technology specialist. And we'll be talking about a particular software in general that'll help with all of that. And now we have reached our Q&A section. And it seems like we've already got a question queued up here. Let's see here. This is from Sal. He's stating he does not really like the need to get rid of Microsoft's SharePoint. Can I integrate Microsoft 365 with the ECM we talked about a few weeks ago?
I can answer some of that, Christian.
Sure.
So yeah, if you have Microsoft SharePoint today, whether that's an on-site, whether you're hosting that yourself on your own server or whether you have an M365 subscription that includes SharePoint, there's several different ways that you can have you can use SharePoint or set up SharePoint. So again, the M365 subscription would include SharePoint, so if it's on site, it can easily be migrated to the cloud. I think with the EMC solution you talked about a few weeks ago, I think you're referring to M-Files probably.
Yeah.
M-Files can definitely, and Christian, you may be able to answer a little bit this too, but M-Files
Sure.
definitely can tie into and integrate with M-Files for sure.
Yeah, so Microsoft, and I can speak a little closely to it, Microsoft and M-Files both have APIs open on both sides of those. Microsoft M-Files is also cloud-based as well. So there's nothing that you would need to host on site anywhere if you wanted to use, say, both of those options and be in Microsoft 365 and use M-Files as your ECM for your company's environment. Let's see. And see, we have another one from Anonymous, and they are asking, what if I have one of those applications that requires me to have to have an on-site server, and how can I move my server into the cloud?
I'll talk about that a little bit too.
Okay.
You know, the Azure cloud servers that I was talking about, you know, we can certainly, I said that I would set up a brand new network, you know, with an Azure cloud server, you know, all different types of cloud services. Amazon, Azure, Google has a cloud service. There's lots of different cloud services out there where you can put a server in the cloud, and lots of different ways that you can do that. You can have your own private cloud server, or you know, there's some co-location. There's all sorts of different terms and ways that you can do that. But if you have one of those applications like that small titling company that we had, and you absolutely do not want a box in your closet, you know, hosting your main business application, we definitely can move that to a cloud server and host the application there. So there's all sorts of different possibilities and options that can happen. Again, it really all comes down to what makes the most sense for you from a cost perspective, scalability perspective, and what's gonna mean the most to you.
All right. Let's see. Sal has looks like a follow-up question. Does Microsoft 365 take care of attachment governance, or do I need a separate platform to handle this? Jeff, do you understand that one?
Not exactly sure what you mean by attachment governance. Like, they're in certain different versions of the Microsoft's, you know, there's all sorts of different licenses. There's a lot of security built into those. So you can set policies in place to, you know, what documents people can download. You know, there's a data loss prevention that prevents employees from organizations accidentally emailing or sharing a document that they shouldn't share. There's obviously audit logs where you can determine who's opened what and done, you know, those sort of things. And there's other security policies that you can put in place of where a document can go and where it can't go. So not sure if I'm answering that question directly, but
that sounds
right.
The
possibilities are almost endless with it.
Yeah, if this is something that's in regards to, say, security of information leaking out, Microsoft 365 does have those features, like Jeff stated, but we also do offer other software like M-Files that does the same as well, where you can redact and make sure that there are no particular files or data that can leave your company without you knowing. All right, and we've got one more question. Let's see here. All right, Anonymous is asking, will it always be cheaper for me to have my server in the cloud or on site?
Jeff, you're rolling. I'll let you.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, you know, that's really hard to know for sure. Again, it all depends on how you're going to use it. How much, you know, like we said, how much storage space you need, how much memory you need, how much processing power you need. All that is going to factor into the cost of your cloud server. And then those other, you know, we'll call them soft costs. How much scalability do you need? How much mobility do you need? You know, do you have a workforce that's scattered across the nation, or do all your employees come into the office and they don't leave the office from 8 to 5? You know, several different factors are going to go into determining from a cost perspective which is going to be the better way to go. But again, it doesn't always, you know, it doesn't always rely on costs. You know, there's so many other benefits from a security perspective, and again, that scalability and mobility that could factor into which way you go there.
Yeah, and I'll add in something too. Along with having a cloud server like Azure or any other cloud server, you can scale that server however you need. So if you need to grow with it, you can add in resources, or if you need to shrink and take away some resources, you can do the same, and that would have an effect on your bottom line. as far as how much you're paying for that particular server as well. All right, and I think that's it for the questions. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. If anyone else has any follow-up questions that you don't currently have or you can't think of until later, please feel free to send us an email at coffee@cobbtechnologies.com, and thank you for joining us.